Hi, today we're going to be talking about solving quadratic equations by factoring. So first, what does a quadratic equation look like? A quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c. That's a standard form of a quadratic equation. Uh, it's an equation that contains at least one square term, and there's a number of ways to solve it, but today we're going to be talking about how to solve it by factoring. Okay, for number one, we have x squared minus x minus 6. So we can see it's already equal to 0, so we don't have to move anything over to this side. So if it's a trinomial, we know that we need to set up this equation with two parentheses. There's no GCF, so we can already set up our two parentheses with x and x. And x times x would equal x squared. So next, we need to find what multiplies to get negative 6 and what adds to get negative 1, because there's a negative 1 in front of this x. And so it would be negative 3 and 2. Both negative 3 times 2 would be negative 6, and then negative 3 plus 2 would be negative 1. And so next, we have to set both parentheses equal to 0. So we get x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. So then basically we just move the 3 and move the 2 over the other side. And so we get plus 3 and plus 3, x equals 3, and minus 2 and minus 2, and then x equals negative 2. So those are our two solutions to this equation. We got x equals negative 3 and x equals negative 2. Okay, for number 2, we have x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 0. So it's already equal to 0, so we don't need to do anything there. And so since it's another trinomial, we know we have to set this equation up with two parentheses again. So we got x and x, again because x and x equal x squared. So we need to find what multiplies to get 36 and what adds to get 12. And so what I see the only option being is 6 and 6. So we get x plus 6 and x plus 6. 6 times 6 is 36, and 6 plus 6 is 12. So, again, we need to set both parentheses equal to 0. So we get x plus 6 equals 0, and x plus 6 equals 0. We get negative 6, or minus 6 minus 6, x equals negative 6, and minus 6 minus 6, x equals negative 6. Alright, and so these are the two solutions. We technically only have to write x equals negative 6, but you can write it either way, x equals negative 6 and x equals negative 6. Okay, for the final problem, we have 2x squared minus 8x plus 8. So we need first look, since we have a 2 in front of the x squared term, what is the GCF of this problem, the greatest common factor? So we can see that all of these terms are divisible by 2. And so we need to set it up, put 2 on the outside since 2 is the GCF, parentheses, x squared minus 4x plus 4. And so next we basically just need to factor like we always have inside these parentheses. So we set up the equation with two parentheses again. So we have x and x, put the 2 on the outside, and we need to find out what multiplies to get 4 and what adds to get or subtracts to get negative 4. And so it would be negative 2 and negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 2 equals 4, and negative 2 minus 2 would be negative 4. And so, again, like we always have, we need to set the parentheses equal to 0, so we have x minus 2 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. And so plus 2, and we get x equals 2, and plus 2, x equals 2. And so again, the solutions would be positive 2, positive 2. To conclude this video, here's just some final tips on how to be more successful when solving quadratic equations by factoring. So first, always check for a GCF. That's a common mistake most people make, is not factoring in the GCF before solving the equation. So you always want to do that first. Next, always check your solutions. Plug whatever x equals back into the equation and see if it equals 0. And next, here's just some tips on how to be more successful as an Algebra 2 student. So you always want to use your resources. Look up tutorial videos on problems, or go into math tutoring if you don't understand your homework, or just ask your fellow peers if you don't understand a problem. And so that's pretty much it. That's how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Thanks.